beautiful people, how you doing? Today we are watching this video from Digital Foundry, Xbox back compatibility, Red Dead Redemption 2, Ark, Just Cause 3, Assetto Corsa, and not long until release. I still haven't got my pre-order because the console is sold out everywhere. Incredible success for Microsoft. And let's see what is this video about and what they talk about. All the technical
So, a little while
stuff.
ago, I published a video showing the power of the Xbox Series X running in backwards compatibility mode.
Yeah, I saw this video, like
Xbox
steady
One X
60 frames
titles,
set
where we could
on
test some of the
4K.
most demanding console
Amazing.
games, unleashed with the power of AMD's Zen 2 CPU architecture and 12 teraflops of GPU compute. But since then,
12
Microsoft's
teraflops.
preview program has released more games, with all of them due to be signed off by the time you receive your consoles. So, in this video, I'll be looking at more of those games, showing off the good and, well,
Like
the
to really
not so
enjoy
good.
everything
Not so
you need
good. Well, maybe that's an
4K TV
exaggeration. What I really mean is
that's got
no
like
real
HDMI
change from the
2.0 and
experience as it
HDR
already
as well.
is on existing Xbox One X consoles.
HDMI
But yes, Xbox
2.1.
Series X backwards compatibility still often has the power to surprise. And yes, this is Ark Survival Evolved, running on a console for the first time at 60 frames per second, albeit in lower quality mode with a very low native rendering resolution. Higher detail mode? Yeah, not even the backwards compatibility power of Series
Okay.
X can get the job done.
I was
there.
thinking,
There is clearly a
I thought
huge
the one on the right
improvement
was
over the
Xbox
existing
One X.
Xboxes. I mean, Ark
Instead
is one
it's
of
the
the
same,
least
but
optimal
with
games
detail
we've
graphic
experienced
off
on
and
Xbox
detail
One.
graphic
Big
on.
improvements from Series X then, straight off the bat, but I think on the flip side, it's worth repeating once again that the more optimal the original experience, the closer the developers got to their performance targets, the less improvement you'll see on Xbox Series X. Case in point, Red Dead Redemption 2, a game that's had a large amount of requests for coverage, and yeah, you see, the thing is, Rockstar did a great job originally on this one. It runs at native 4K on Xbox One X. There is no dynamic resolution scaling, and it hits its performance
Hopefully there
targets
is like an
really
option
well,
for
with only minor dips. Series X
4K
obviously
6, no,
improves on that, but curiously it's still
60
not
frame.
perfect as we traverse our old Sandony benchmark. What you do get is extra texture filtering quality, but man, wouldn't Microsoft's 2x frame rate technology go down a storm on this one? Then again, we may simply see Rockstar release a remastered version of the game. I also think there are other
So
limitations in
Red
play
Dead
on
Redemption is
back-to-back
stuck at
titles that
30
you need
frames
to
per
be aware
second.
of.
I don't understand.
Sometimes the original games had performance caps in place that can't be shaken off without intervention from Microsoft or the original developer. So here's Batman Return to Arkham. Well, the Arkham City portion of the game, the 30 FPS frame rate cap can't be moved, so improvements over the original game running on Xbox One X are going to be minimal to non-existent. Again, the best you can hope for
Okay,
here
so
would
some
be
games
enhanced
they
texture
cannot
filtering
be
and of
upgraded
course
to
auto HDR.
higher
Now
frame
things go
rate.
from a tad lackluster to downright bizarre when you look at Return to Arkham's Arkham Asylum Remaster, which still, bafflingly, runs at 45 frames per second locked, meaning constant judder from start to finish. Series X can only give you a better lock to 45 frames per second. It can't remove that lock. You can't get 60 frames per second.
What the
More's the
fuck?
pity. But as I mentioned in my
So
first
this is
video,
the
where
fault
games
of the
have
developers
unlocked frame
on
rate
how
options, or
they
indeed
develop the
truly
game.
terrible performance to begin with, you can see some absolutely transformative experiences with Xbox Series X. So this one is interesting because Just Cause 3, well, it's legendary, right? I had the chance to talk to Square Enix's studio tech director back in the day when I looked at Just Cause 4, and he told me that the crucial physics code in Just Cause 3 used just 2 cores, resulting in this truly terrible performance. Jaguar just couldn't keep up. And actually what you're seeing here is Xbox One X dipping beneath 20 frames per second. And remember, One X had the fastest Jaguar implementation of all of the current gen consoles. Not surprisingly though, Xbox Series X
So
can
this
run
game are all shit
day at its
basically.
target 30 frames
No,
per
they're
second,
not,
no
but
matter
they're
how
not
insane the action.
optimized for
In fact, it could likely lock to 60 frames per second
the
if
new
that was
generation
actually
of
an option.
gaming.
Now this title never received Xbox One X support, which means that the experience is and likely always be 900p, short of a Microsoft intervention, of course. But I guess what that does mean is that if you see this game running on Xbox Series S, it's likely going to look exactly the same to what you're seeing here. So yes, one of the most CPU-bound games on Xbox One finally runs at its original performance target. Think of it as an early Christmas miracle, if you like, but more to the point. I've got to say, the game is really great, and I think now you can appreciate what it offers.
Yeah, I played this game. It's fun.
Awful performance.
It's fun to go around and blow things
up. I really
up.
hope that the PlayStation 4 version is similarly improved when it runs on PlayStation 5. It should be exactly the same as what you're seeing here, just with the original native 1080p base resolution from the original PS4 game.
They should make Just Cause next gen online with like 100 people in the world or something like that.
Resolution scaling can improve image quality on Xbox Series X. I showed Modern Warfare 2019 running with improved performance, no screen tearing.
This game should run at 120.
There's something extra here that I'd like to highlight. If you look closely at the buildings there, you'll see that there's less in the way of horizontal scaling. Series X is resolving more detail. Nice stuff, but here's another, perhaps more dramatic example.
It's all things I couldn't see.
Hellblade has a 60 frames per second mode, and as you can see here with our performance readouts, it's running locked at 60 frames per second on both machines. But if we look closer, image clarity on Series X is far, far superior. Now, you might be waiting for the pixel counts here, but this one is extremely difficult to get a lock on. And to be honest, we're swiftly reaching the point where resolution as a metric doesn't really matter. We need a different way of looking at this. Somehow we need a way of measuring clarity.
Next Hellblade?
Something we've been puzzling over a fair
because
bit
that game
here
looks
Digital
good.
Foundry over many months now.
I wonder how it's gonna look.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to reiterate what I said before. Games with unlocked frame rate options really are the bee's knees for Series X, especially if you have the choice of resolution options too. And I think the vanishing of Ethan Carter kind of stumbled onto something rather special here, in that there are 1080p, 1440p and 2160p options in the menu. Plus, you can toggle the frame rate cap on and off at all of those resolutions. Let's look at Xbox One X first in 1080p and 2160p modes. 1080p, as you might expect, no problem sustaining 60 frames per second for the most part, but clearly 2160p is too much. I think back in the day, 1440p turned out to be a good middle ground. Interestingly though, at 1080p you can see that at some points the game is CPU limited. There are pockets of performance dips which by a process of elimination can only be CPU based in nature. 4K modes, like for like, 1X
in some places the rock looked better in the
4K 60 experience
1080p version.
CPU or GPU bottlenecks. So I think the astronauts never built Ethan Carter specifically to scale beyond Xbox One X, but due to those options it just does. And now I do have to wonder whether having performance options built into console games to future-proof them to a certain degree may now be a good thing, even if it's not particularly performant on current generation hardware. Now, I talked in the first video about transformative experiences, and here's another one. The Evil Within 2. A brilliant game, but it's similar to Dead or Alive 6 that I covered in my first backwards compatibility
and 60 frames per second games look so much better.
We are GPU limited, and this is the kind of frame rate graph.
First time I played Call of Duty 144 frames per second.
Series X doesn't
I was
quite
like,
lock
what the
to 60
fuck?
frames per second. So we do
How
have
can
an
I play
interesting
with the
benchmark
console?
scenario here, and if we switch the graphing to
I'm never gonna
percentage
play console
differentials,
anymore.
the gap between 1X and Series X ranges from around 70% of extra performance on the new console all the way up to a remarkable 2 times multiplier in frame rate. Pretty awesome scaling there, I think, but it's not a uniform performance boost from title to title, which brings us on to the baffling mystery that is Assetto Corsa Competizione.
Competizione.
Well, I'm not really sure where to begin on this one. On the one hand, since Tom first looked at the game, the option has been added to unlock the frame rate, which is obviously a good thing, especially when we're testing on a next generation console. Having played it on One X, I'm not sure it adds much to the experience. It still feels really janky, but being unlocked, Series X obviously can do a ton better, as you can see. Again, it's rare that you hit 60 frames per second. And yeah, moving into percentage differential territory, our gains now seem to range from about 44
why cannot
to
hit 60 frames per second?
I've got to admit, I'm kind of baffled by
Like,
why
the game
this
doesn't
runs
look
as
like
it does on
insane.
Xbox One X, but to see the combined
Looks
power
alright.
of Zen 2 and 12
Doesn't look like
teraflops
wow,
of
what the
GPU power
fuck,
produce just this level of improvement. Well, I'm not sure I can actually process that.
What is this?
I guess at least we have another Series X title to add to the growing list of games that I want to try with variable refresh rate support. So I'm going to end the analysis here with something rather interesting, a game that you can run with VSync totally disabled, which in turn completely removes the frame rate cap. And I think this may well be the only title for Xbox One that does this. But Rainbow Six Siege in its single-player modes basically allows you to remove that frame rate cap completely. And if you set your console to 120 Hz output, you do actually see all of those frames properly rendered, albeit with eye-searing screen tear. Now that's not pretty, but this is going to be the closest thing we'll get to a PC-style benchmark. And as you can see, the game actually renders its own frame rate counter, which I've added into the composite split screen feed here. Now, I would love to use our frame rate analysis tools here if I could. Now, I can track the tearing and thus get a proper frame rate reading on One X, but on Series X, performance actually exceeds 120 frames per second, which means that our tools can't track the performance profile with full accuracy. So yeah, no in-depth graphing for this one, but when we freeze frame very similar scenes, I detect around 80 to 90% I wanted the console to be available for everyone, so I can buy it. Series X. Really interesting stuff, I'd say.
I play
so
Call of
that's
Duty.
Basically about as much as I can say about backwards compatibility right now.
I play like
without
3-4
having access
games.
to the full library. There's still no access
for
to
sure I'm gonna buy the Game Pass.
New Colossus, for example, but I fully expect that to lock
I'm
at
gonna
4K
play
60
more
based
games
on
that
the
I
equivalent
will
results
never
I've seen
buy
from games with a very similar performance profile. I'm also really keen on checking out Crysis Remastered because I suspect that the performance modes there are entirely CPU bound. And as we've seen in both Just Cause 3 and Assassin's Creed Unity, well, CPU no longer seems to be any kind of bottleneck with Xbox Series X. I also really want to check out Star Wars Republic Commando on OG Xbox, which not even Xbox One X can render that fully at a locked
I think I
60
played
frames
this
per
game.
second.
I don't
Anyway,
remember.
I think there's something really interesting to take away from all of this testing. You see, I love the fact that Xbox is getting improved versions of so many games right out of the box. Xbox One X often delivered the best multi-platform experience, but sometimes gunning for native 4K resolution came at the expense of performance. So, an interesting example here. I think Modern Warfare 2019 is as good an example of this as any. Xbox One X looked better than PlayStation 4 Pro, but the Pro flat out ran better at a lower resolution. So at that point, I'd prefer to play on the Sony machine. But the Series X just powers through to deliver the definitive experience on console at least. And I honestly think that with the arrival of the enhanced machines, we've seen this last generation get a time extension in a way. Games generally still look awesome, but now they're running better on Xbox Series X, often transformed.
So now we're gonna see more games running on the old console at 30 frames or like even less, and hopefully 60 on the Xbox and PlayStation.
And no performance modes to unlock the frame rate for the most part. Throwing all of that extra horsepower at low resolutions isn't ideal. I'd say that's the main problem facing Xbox Series S really. It doesn't have access to Xbox One X performance profiles, meaning those enhancements, those higher resolutions, those higher frame rates are locked out. Now hopefully the Microsoft compatibility team can step in here.
Basically
anyway,
this is what I was doing when I was playing Just Cause 3.
But it's likely to be on Series S or on new titles that
I was like attaching people to barrels, attaching people to cars,
ring the bell for instant notifications when
attaching
a new video
people
hits
to
the
other
channel,
people,
or when we kick off a live stream. The Digital Foundry Patreon, as ever, stands ready to serve you with pristine quality video downloads of everything we do. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this one, and just generally, thanks for watching.
I would like to work
Digital Foundry
as like thumbnail guy for Digital Foundry or something like that. Anyway, not many days are from the release of the new console. I'm sure a lot of you are excited. Which console are you going to buy? Let me know in the comment section. I'm waiting for the Xbox to be available so I can buy it. And hopefully, I want to try Cyberpunk. Yeah, I want to play Cyberpunk. I want to see, like, explore the city and stuff like that. Yeah, Cyberpunk is gonna be the biggest game of 2020, and hopefully they release like some like multiplayer information as well. Imagine if it's open world. I will buy a better PC just for, but by the time they make like a mod where you can play Cyberpunk, like you play like GTA RP, like it's gonna be like 5 or 4 years. So in 5 or 4 years, probably I'm gonna buy a new computer anyway. But for the time being, an Xbox Series X is gonna be okay. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.